Outside of Europe, wines are typically labeled by their grape variety. And when we order wine, it's the same way. Oh, I'll have a bottle of Chardonnay or a bottle of Cabernet or so on and so forth. European wines are much more difficult for non-Europeans to understand. One, the wine labels are in a different language typically. Two, European wine laws are much more in-depth and in some cases even more Byzantine than countries outside of Europe. So it feels like it's a lot more confusing and harder to understand. Yes, there is much more to it, but it's actually not that difficult once you break it down. This is Kurt Sasek, the president of Wine Taster's Choice, and in today's video, I'm going to teach you the basics of the Italian wine classification system. Getting to understand this classification system will provide you with more knowledge so you can make smarter wine decisions more confidently when buying Italian wine. Today, I'm going to take you on a tour of Italy. Virtually, that is. Besides the fact that Italy has some of the most scenic landscapes on earth with its picturesque vineyards, countrysides, and verdant rolling hills, Italy is also the home of some of the most famous wines in the world, from Barbaresco, Chianti, Barolo, Amarone, and so forth, and many more. Before we get into the classification system itself, you need to understand something about European wines. In Europe, the region plays a much more significant role when it comes to wines than it does for non-European countries. Oftentimes, the names of European wines are also the names of the region they're from. For example, in America, you would say, give me a Cab, or a Pinot, or Chardonnay. In Europe, you would typically refer to a wine by its region, like Chablis, Chianti, or Champagne. These are both the names of the region and the wine. Also, Europe has much stricter wine regulations than what we have in America and other countries outside of Europe. So, for example, if you call something Chianti Classico, not only does it have to meet the standards dictated by Chianti Classico, but it has to be from the region of Chianti Classico as well. Italy has more than 350 different grape varieties in 20 different wine-producing regions, with wine regions dating back to the 8th century BC. Now on to the Italian classification system. The Denominazione di Origine Controllata, or D.O.C. for short. Let's stick with that. Less syllables. D.O.C. Easier. Please remember, when I use the term D.O.C. in this video, D.O.C. is another way to say a region. I'm putting that in layman's term, but a D.O.C. is an area with the regulations for the wines in that area. The Italian D.O.C. was created in 1963, and Italy, like other European countries, modeled their wine classification systems after France's A.O.C. On that note, my video on this channel regarding the French wine classification system would be a great supplement to this video so you can understand how the French system influenced the Italian system. The D.O.C. specifies production area and methods for each wine, but Italy goes one step further than the French system and other countries, as in Italy there is a quality taste test. So they offer a guarantee, basically. So why have these classifications? Well, it protects not only the integrity and quality of the wines or other foodstuffs, because these classification systems can also apply to foods, but it also protects you, the consumer. Think of it this way. If you're from America, then we have ratings on our meat by the government, USDA Prime, USDA Choice. It's like that. When you see that stamp on a piece of beef in the supermarket, you know it has met a certain quality standard. Think of that, but much more involved and much more restrictive when it comes to Italian wine laws. The D.O.C. has 4 wine classifications, and it is worth noting that Italy has its classification system for the entire country, but on top of that, each D.O.C. has its own additional rules as well. In a nutshell, the classification system works like this. The lower the classification system, the fewer restrictions put on the winemaker, and typically the lower the classification means lower quality of wine, although there are some exceptions to that rule. As you move up the classification system, there are more stringent standards and more restrictions on everything in the winemaking process, from what region the wine must be from, what grapes are allowed to be used, to what style of wine is permitted, to the labeling, alcohol percentage, everything. There are 4 levels to the Italian wine classification system. I'm going to take you through each one, going from lowest in classification to the highest. The first one and the lowest one is called Vino da Tavola, or translated, table wine. There's no geographical indication for Vino da Tavola classification wines. As long as the grapes are grown in Italy, that's enough. This classification of wine is rarely high enough quality to be shipped outside of Italy as well. The next level is IGT, which stands for Indicazione Geografica Tipica. This means typical geographic indication. The IGT classification is thought to be roughly the same equivalent as France's Vin de Pays. All of the grapes in an IGT wine should be from the region stated on the label. So in other words, if the label says Chianti, then the grapes need to be from the Chianti region, whereas in the Vino di Tavola region, the grapes just had to be from Italy. There's no specification on region. While IGT classified wines have more restrictions on the region, they do not have strict standards in regards to the style of wine. So the winemaker has more freedom to make wine in the style he or she wants. IGT wines are often, but not always, lower quality than D.O.C wines. Some winemakers actually choose the IGT classification over the strict D.O.C or DOCG status, so they have more freedom over the style of wine. A perfect example of the exception to this rule is Super Tuscans, which I'll get into in another video. The third highest level in the Italian wine classification system is called the D.O.C, the Denominazione di Origine Controllata, means designation of origin. This is thought to be roughly the equivalent of France's A.O.C, and there are currently 329 different wines with the D.O.C classification. The most popular D.O.C wine I think you all have heard of is called Prosecco. So how do you identify a D.O.C wine? Now we're at the top, the DOCG, the top classification level in Italy's classification system. DOCG stands for Denominazione di Origine Controllata e Garantita. This is the highest quality level, and it was created in 1980 due to criticisms that there were too many DOC wines and the quality was inconsistent. So what makes DOCG wines different? The guarantee. The wines in the lower classifications must simply be grown and made in accordance with the rules of the appellation or the region that they're from. At the DOC level, not only are there strict standards that have to be met in accordance to how the wine is made, but the wines are subjected to a quality taste panel. So in other words, there's a group of individuals that taste the wines. If the wine meets the taste test quality standards, then and only then will those wines be given the DOCG status. There are now 74 wines with the DOCG classification in Italy. How do you know if a wine is DOCG or not? Here's an example of what the label looks like. There you have it. That is the Italian wine classification system. So let's do a quick recap before we go. Remember, in Europe, the region plays a much more significant role in wine. Oftentimes, the wines are named after the region they are from. And remember, European wine laws are much more strict than they are in many other countries around the world. The classification system works like this. The lower the classification, the less restrictions on the wine, and usually the lower the quality. The four classification systems are, in order of lowest to highest, Vino di Tavola, or table wine, IGT, DOC, DOCG. As you move up the classification system, the standards are tougher and it becomes more strict, and there are more regulations on the wine, making it harder to achieve the higher classifications. Thank you for watching. This is Chris Hassick, President of Wine Taster's Choice.